Annenberg Colloquium. We're delighted to have Professor Dolf Zillman with us today. And to introduce him, Professor Peter Loiter.
Well, thanks, Peter. I have the great pleasure to introduce Dolf Zillman, a professor emeritus from the University of Alabama, who finally came here after he was invited to join the faculty and to build the program about 25 years ago, before the building was even erected. He never made it. He instead went to the University of Indiana. He thought that's a better offer, so maybe he is about to change his mind today. He has been a professor of psychology and communication, particularly working on the psychology of aggression, sexuality, and emotion. And between these areas, he had also become interested in entertainment. And to call him the doyen of entertainment research today is probably an understatement, because he has published around 300 peer-reviewed articles in journals of psychology, medicine, neurology, and a bit in communication as well. And just to give you a little bit of an anecdote, I went to two conferences last year in Zurich, Switzerland, both devoted to the study of entertainment. One was an interdisciplinary conference, one was one organized by the German NCA, or the equivalent of the NCA here. At both conferences, there was not a single talk in which he wasn't referred to. So it's either critically or, in support, which basically says that he is not only the person in that area here in the US, but pretty much around the globe. He has established all the theories, and I'm sure my students from my various PhD classes can attest to that, all the theories that we are dealing with, you name it, mood management, affective disposition, excitation transfer, any theory that is important in the field of entertainment is basically written and thought of by Dolf Zillman. So I guess everybody is very curious to hear what he has to say about excursions into the new psychology of entertainment. Please welcome with me Dolf Zillman.
Thank you. You may actually be surprised to learn, then again, maybe not, that I started my career in entertainment research at the ripe age of 4. I have made key observations which I will try to share with you, and it all started, at least for me, with what is called the Kasperle-Theater, which is a German institution, like the Punch and Judy show. And it was, of course, prior to, is it okay? Can one see it? Yes. It's prior to the advent of television. I mean, it's prior to us being able to record music, so this was way back where children had pretty much nothing else but the Kasperle-Theater. And I should explain it a little bit. This is now a puppet theater where you have a main protagonist, a hero, always, as in this picture, running around with a big club. He is, of course, putting things right. He is fighting evil. He is fighting danger. So it's a children's hero. And I will give you maybe a suspenseful scene as an example, but let me sort of go in sequence. It usually started with Kasperle addressing the audience, and he would say, in rough translation, "Are you all here?" And we as children are saying, "Yay, we are all here." So interactivity here at its most primitive. Then he would go on, make a few remarks about the weather, just to get things going. And he did something that I remember distressed me greatly. He also could pick on people in the audience, and if I take something out of the picture here, it would be, and you girl there with the red head or with the red cap, how are you doing? Oh, this particular person would respond, and he would say, "Well, looking pretty today." and on he would go. Just to show you, how strong the rapport was, and to us children, bewildering, if we would be capable of thinking about it, that he could, puppet, could somehow talk to people and single out people, talk to individual people. So I'll come back to this element, but the point I wanted to make now is this. Forgive me for my cough. I have been hiking and I caught something that I shouldn't have. So here comes back to the scenery, the Kasperle Theater, because as Kasper would talk to us, behind him would sneak up, let's say, a crocodile, with his snout wide open, ready to snap his head. And you can imagine what we children would have to tell him. Watch out, look, there's a crocodile behind you, turn around. And we were very active with Kasperle. And he would, or I guess the Muppet players essentially would tease us. They would look at in the wrong direction, and we would get even louder. We would yell at the top of our lungs. And of course, finally, the resolution was that he clobbered the crocodile. But the point I want to stress here is this enormous activity on the part of the audience. If you look at what we hope to accomplish, then you can call it, we try to intervene in the action that was unfolding before us that we thought was real. I'll come back to this element, it seemed to be real again. And then, after a while, my sister dragged me to a real theatrical performance, which came my evidence point number 2. And this is a fairy tale called Rumpelstiltskin, a grim fairy tale, of a little fellow living deep in the woods who could spin straw into gold. And he helped out a peasant's girl, and she, because of his assistance, became the queen, but he had a contract that he would get her firstborn child. Well, she had second thoughts once she delivered, and Rumpelstiltskin was a little soft with her rather, and made a new contract and said, fine, you can keep your baby if you find out my name. And he, of course, guarded his name. This was the deep secret, and in the deep woods, he would dance around the fire like here in this picture, and would have a song, oh, how nice that nobody knows my name, that my name is, and we would tell him, no, there are spies that the queen has in the woods. And you could see one on stage lurking around, and he would take no heed and finally blurt out that my name is Rumpelstiltskin. Then, he saw the spy, and he saw that he was found out, that he had lost his rights to the baby. And here comes this particular ending, which I think you may not find in other presentations. Rumpelstiltskin was so distressed about it, he ripped himself to pieces. So as children, you're 4 years old, I saw legs and arms flying through the air, a body laying on the ground, and only, at close inspection, we could recognize that this wasn't him, this wasn't the person, but these were his stuffed stockings, that somebody had tossed in as he jumped off stage. So, to us, of course, an enormous emotional reaction because we deemed it real. And suddenly there was a clue this wasn't real after all, and we could somehow curb our emotions, we could bring things under control. Well, this is a situation of reality lost because we clearly reacted emotionally to the Kasperle Theater and here to a fairy tale like Rumpelstiltskin with full-blasted, full-blown emotions until, in terms of the Kasperle Theater, my little sister told me, oh, look, do you see this little hole there in the canvas below the stage? That's where they look through. And then, of course, reality was lost to me. So I knew that the puppet was a puppet. And here, very similar. I could somehow curb my emotions because I could recognize that wasn't real after all. Watch out for the sequence. The sequence was first uncontrolled emotions, as if things were real before us, and then somehow clues that helped us to break out of this intense emotion. This, I will come back to this too, is exactly the opposite what has been taught for centuries, essentially, well, at least for decades, which goes back to Coleridge, and his idea of the suspension of disbelief as a necessity for emotional reactivity to at least written material, written prose, written drama. Well, all this knowledge that I had here acquired was laying dormant for a long time until I taught seminars in the psychology of entertainment, we called it. So I guess these were the first seminars of entertainment somewhere in the country. It was in this country. And we looked at such concepts, key concepts like identification, the Freudian identification. Oh, I have it here. And here, if you just look at the upper definition, which is a very fair one, coming out of film scholarship, Friedberg, and this, I think, is very correct and very succinct. This is what identification means. He says it's a process which commands the subject to be displaced by an other. It is a procedure which refuses and recuperates the separation between self and other. You could sort of get in and out of a character, whether it was voluntary or deliberate or automatic. That is unclear from that. But it always reminds me actually of California. I'm very often in San Francisco, and they have in and out burgers. And this was sort of here the concept, in and out. You could jump into a character, out of a character. But for the moment, and if it was only a fleeting moment, you would be them. That's a key thing. Here comes also someone whose name you must have heard. This is the noted director Martin Scorsese. He had once, and you may have seen it, a promotional piece on television for the motion picture industry. And he wanted to make the point, and did actually rather nicely make the point, that there's such a wealth of characters. But then he came and said something about identification. Here are all these characters, and just watch the movies, and you are them. It still rings in my ear. You are them. Here's this notion again. Can we really become another person? At the surface of it, if you take it literally, it seems to be absurd. But he's not incorrect, because this is really the Freudian concept. And I found somewhere this hidden, not so well known. When people talk about identification, they usually talk about the Oedipus complex and the father, or I should start with the son, the father bond and so forth, and how it deteriorates and so forth, or how it's being challenged by libidinal things. But this here is a direct quote from Freud in an article. In the heading, it is already people on stage. So this is really the stage play. This is fiction. This is a theater, and I don't know if I have to read the whole thing to you. Why don't we quickly go through it here? In this, and you notice one thing. This man is very cynical about the spectator. Here it comes. In the pseudo-world of the theater, the spectator is a poor soul to whom nothing of importance seems to happen, who some time ago had to moderate or abandon his ambition to take center stage in matters of significance, and who longs to feel and to act and to arrange things according to his desires. He wants to be a hero. So the loser wants to be a hero. He really describes the loser here. If only for a limited time, again, the fleeting moment concept. And playwrights and actors make it possible for him through identification with a hero. So this has, in my judgment, become commonplace folklore. We still talk about it as if we could identify with other people. And we certainly identify with fictional characters. This is so deep in all students I've ever taught that it's difficult to convince them that this might be a less than perfect concept. And the concept can, I think, be considered challenged by such evidence as I gave you in examples. if this is reality before you, and you as a person try to intervene, to change, to influence this reality that seems to be rolling off before you, well, then you are you and you never leave your skin. And the notion of identification as it is here presented, I think is a big stumbling block to the development of superior theories. By superior I mean better predictive theories than the concept of identification, which I think the time has come to abandon. At any rate, it was all laying dormant until I taught my little seminar presenting these things, and the student of all places out of California, he said, well, Dr. Zillman, let me give you an example. The cliche of the cowboy movie, the rider riding, while he plays the guitar or whistles a song, feels great about himself, rides into an ambush with all the villains waiting on rooftops with the shotguns. If we identify, shouldn't we not respond to the shotguns at all? Should we not somehow respond to this knowledge? Shouldn't we just whistle along with the hero? So in a primitive way, this made it clear to me, hey, yes, this concept seems to have its problems. And then we have, could talk for hours, I guess. We have so many examples. We have done research on horror movies, and there you find it again that even adults can sit on their mouth. They can't help but to make spontaneous comments, and I have seen comments made like to Friday the 13th, when Jason is chasing a girl and she is finding herself in a closet, and in the closet is already a body, and a knife or a dagger is sticking out of this body, and the audience yells, take the knife, and want to intervene and help somehow. This is all evidence against identification if you take this concept seriously. So let this one example suffice. Maybe I should point to something else in communication research rather than in psychology, but to be fair, it comes actually out of sociology. I'm talking the concept of parasocial interactivity, where again you have the idea by sociologists like mostly Horton and his collaborator. The idea is that if we see particular people in the news time and again, we develop a rapport to them, and they become sort of friend-like, or we hate their guts, that they are more despicable characters, but we have developed this disposition of despicability or of liking them. And of course, what I shall propose in drama theory, or in a theory of drama appreciation, is that this, of course, happens in a regular movie too, just much more quickly. But it's character development. You start to like or to hate somebody because of what they are doing. So just in short, what I will present in greater detail. Now, maybe I should just quickly come back to this argument here that goes back to Coleridge, a British writer in 1800 early, and he had this notion, for emotions to be generated from reading prose, you would have to be willing to suspend any disbelief you might have, and again here for the moment, meaning if only for a fleeting moment. And this is also in the new thinking about entertainment virtually turned around. We just don't like the idea anymore as we talk about high fidelity motion pictures or computer games, that we have to sort of, as we start playing or as we start watching, to keep telling ourselves, well, let me believe that this is real. I think it's far more automatic, and this goes back to new neurological research, and the big name here is Joseph Ledoux, who has made this enormous discovery and demonstrated it experimentally, that when you have emotion arousing stimuli coming in, they are actually reaching old archaic brain sectors or structures before they ever reach the cortex. So in a way, as we reacted to the Muppets, we had real reactions because we were tripped by a poorly discriminating old system. I talk about structures mostly in the amygdala, but also, certain detours through the hippocampus, I don't want to be technical, come into play because this is where our deeper emotional memories are sitting, and they can, of course, also be revived by what comes our way, what we take in. But the idea is now that it's not particularly specific what comes in, but it can hit us as something threatening if dangerous situations are shown in a movie. If, I don't know, water is rushing at somebody, or if rocks fall from the sky, or if you have a snarling animal looking or threatening a particular protagonist. All these are conditions that are very quickly processed. The emotional reaction involuntarily is initiated, at least in its incipient parts, because then, after a very brief delay of milliseconds, we can also reason about it, and we can recognize that we have been fooled and tricked. We can respond to cues that show that it's not to be taken or mistaken for reality. But the sequence, as you should see, is turned around. We respond first in a primitive way. And then, of course, we can let it go if we don't come up with a critical assessment that we have been fooled and this is an undesirable reaction. So then maybe there's a bit of relaxing our disbelief, because we say, well, it's a movie, and you let it happen and you keep on crying to a tragedy or something like this. But first is the incipient emotional reaction, and it's sitting deeper than we thought before. Now, I come to new concepts. And the new concepts are not, there's more to it. I just wanted you to look at number 1 here, where I should have read it. So it says, regarding emotions and only emotions. If you don't deal with emotions, then you might as well wait until your higher centers, until the I don't know, the prefrontal cortex reacts to it or so. But regarding emotions, so limited to emotions, maybe I should say, we respond to represented environments, and you have to include any kind of social environment, as though they were real, until signals of their unreality force recognition of this circumstance. And then it's up to our cortex to moderate and modify how we want to continue reacting. Now, as we started to build new theories, we found ourselves to go back way beyond, way back beyond Freud. So this is pre-Freudian in a laughable way, because we started with Aristotle. Aristotle and his poetics, his theory of drama. He has certain, if I only would find it, here it is. He has certain propositions here. The two transitions that he declares are those that we shouldn't use in drama unless we want to scare people off or want to make sure that they have a good time or don't enjoy it. And he doesn't give any, he's not a psychologist, so he didn't feel compelled to explain why this is his word, and it's literally, he says, well, because it's odious. So, if somebody would present it in this fashion, so it was self-evident to him. And there's something to it. This might be self-evident to you too. And all we did is now take this pillar from Aristotle. By the way, I'm talking now about what is called the disposition theory of drama appreciation, which some people, film scholars like Murray Smith, have talked about it, because we go back to Aristotle. Has called Aristotelian drama theory to set it off against Freudian, which is still the dominant notion in drama theory. So Freudian analysis is still very much dominant. Not in psychology, but in film studies. So we had to just modify this and elaborate on this, and I don't want to give you the full theory because it would take too much time. But here just to show you that we now put it, first of all, in the affirmative rather than the negative. And you have here just two propositions. One concerns victimization in drama, if somebody is victimized. And the first proposition here concerns witnessing the victimization of a disliked antagonist at the hands of a liked protagonist fosters delight, enjoyment. And here you see an effort to make it measurable for research purposes, not to be just so general and broad as Aristotle was about it. The experiential intensity, the emotional intensity of which increases with A, the liking of the protagonist, measurable, the disliking of the antagonist, measurable, and C, the extent to which the antagonist is deemed deserving of a particular victimization. Now, to have a full theory, you have to also consider benefaction in this paradigm, and then even the conditions of injustice. And I just show it to you to give you the idea, hey, if you ever are interested, you can read about it, you can look it up, it's published, of course. So it's easy enough to find. I don't want to spend time on it since I have a graph that explains it better, or an overview that is easier to understand than all the verbiage. So here is the disposition theory in a graph form. And just think back of the examples that I have given you. Also, this goes really back to Aristotle in the sense that he had used these terms, a good man, a good human. So he didn't mean to be, gender discriminating. I can't speak for him, but I don't want to make apologies for him either. So what is what he called a good man or a bad man? It's of course a character who does good things, intends to do good things, things that meet with your approval. But it's all subjectified by your judgment. It's your moral judgment to consider it a good deed, a good intent, or an evil one. And there you cannot live without moral judgment. And there we owe much to another philosopher, a Brit, Adam Smith, and his theory of moral sentiments, if you have ever looked at that great book. I have used this, and if I may express myself in exaggerated form, I consider respondents to drama, I have called them untiring moral monitors, because they are just sitting there judging, oh, not good, oh, what, I mean, they judge good and bad all the time. And this is the basis for forming dispositions, affective dispositions toward the characters. Because if somebody is just meeting your moral, or whatever he does or things meets your moral approval, then you start to like that character. And this is here, you can see the stages. First you observe behavior. This is character development that I'm talking about, character development in drama. So you come to approve. If you sanction it, it's commendation. This, in turn, leads to positive affect, liking, caring, amity, and here come anticipatory emotions. This is a stage of anticipatory emotions because we already have emotions before we see characters suffer or be jubilant, before they actually act to outcomes or present outcomes, before things happen to them, because we are really actively hoping for positive outcomes if we like a character. And at the same time, we fear negative outcomes. This, of course, this letter box that I mentioned here is the box in drama. It's a suspense cell. There's a suspense where we already fear that terrible things could happen to whom we like and care for, as if it were real. As if it were real. And finally, when this happens and the hoped-for event materializes, or the dreaded event materializes, then we experience our anticipated emotion. We live it out. It becomes manifest. And once this has happened, you can classify it. You can classify it as, this was concordant affect, which is another word for empathizing. This is an important new concept. It's empathy. And you empathize if you become sad, if something sad happened to the character you love or you care for, and you empathize when something bad happened. So in either case, good outcomes, bad outcomes, you empathize. You feel similar things, not the same, but bad goes with bad. At least at the hedonic divide, it splits nicely. And then, of course, you somehow have a final reaction. It's back to moral judgment. You like the outcome. This is what he deserved. Or you're upset, that somebody didn't get the goodies that he deserved, or he was somehow coming to harm. How terrible. This is, of course, in the condition for tragedy, the outcomes of first suspense books and then the tragic books. Now, and then this feeds back, and this is the loop C. Then you, of course, alter. Possibly you alter, not necessarily, but you may alter, depending upon the outcome, your feelings about the character. And the way you observe the character in the future is also affected. And this feeding back makes this here a recursive paradigm, because you can apply it to miniature plots within a complete piece of drama, but you can also apply it to the overreaching drama, to the whole. So it's recursive. And I give you now the line of, in a way, the heroes. The bottom line is the villains. And there you can see everything is the inverse, so I don't have to spend time on this. So here, once you have started to hate somebody because morally you disapproved and you condemned, then you hope for negative outcomes. The bastard should be duly punished. And you fear that something positive might happen. This is virtually noxious. Here you had a bastard and he gets the girl. This is just not palatable drama. And what you come up with in terms of empathy is counter-empathy. If you deal with a villain and you have developed an emotional disposition, then what you come to is if you see him have a good time, it is your annoyance, and if you see him suffer, it is your joy. So it reverses. So it's nicely, one is the inverse of the other. So this is now the disposition theory of drama. And once we had that, I shall not bother you with theory for a while. But here comes, at least by way of indication, I actually have no idea how much time I have. Eventually, you might have to tell me. Here, what did we do to prove that this is the meaningful paradigm? Well, I had money from the National Science Foundation, so we produced movies. This was done at Indiana University. I had film students, actually very experienced filmmakers, and we produced now a film. Now, we developed, according to the paradigm, some characters. We had the protagonist, 8-year-old, and our respondents were also 8 years old. So children, a children's film about children, and here was the protagonist to be developed into a bastard or into a very pleasant, nice fella. And he had a little brother. And then, of course, you create, like in a movie, interactions. So we had a sequence of interactions. What I remember is at one point the little brother comes and says, "Oh, my toy plane broke, and look here, the wing is off." And the big brother, when he was to be a likable character, he took the glue and fixed it. When he was the evil character, he looked at it and said something like, "Too bad," and broke it off. Can't be repaired, broke it off. Or, there was a conflict about peanut butter sandwich. So, here the two being at home alone, went to the fridge, and it turned out that when there wasn't enough peanut butter in the jar, so it just was for one sandwich, not for two. So you can imagine, how this came out when he was to be the nice guy. He was sharing the peanut butter, so everybody got only half a sandwich. When he was the obnoxious guy, he took it for himself and said, "Too bad, nothing left for you." And then we created two endings to these films that featured a likable and a dislikable character. Two endings where this person, whatever role he played, was either rewarded, and this was done by suddenly, the car honking outside. Parents had come back and they had a brand new bike for this character, the focal character. And the last final scenes that we were particularly interested in, or responses to them we were particularly interested in, was him jumping up and down in joy. Oh, facial expression, glorious, I got my new bike. Well, obviously he didn't deserve it in one case, and maybe he was deserving of it in the other case. But the other ending now was the opposite. There was his bike outside, independent of the parents involved, and he jumped on it and he crashed. And the final scenes, cringing in pain. And now what is the reaction of people, and you can see how predictable it is. So look, when he is a good character, the good guy. When the good guy had pleasure, the audience had pleasure. When the good guy suffered, the audience suffered. And this is exactly the other way around, although not that extreme, separated for the negative guy. But it's what I said, a bad character's mishap, misfortune, suffering is the audience's joy, and the other way around. So I shall not spend time on this, but now I have to tell you how you come more up with rigorous proof, because we published this, and sort of the reviewers already indicated, yeah, good research, but isn't it pretty obvious? Yeah, it was pretty obvious, but the next one is not so obvious. Now we have to find proof that moral judgment is the key to it all. If somebody cannot morally judge the behavior and intentions of people, then they should not develop the appropriate dispositions. And where would we find these people? Well, we had to work with mentally challenged children. And here is what they do. No matter, because they could not put things morally in perspective, they didn't develop disliking or liking accordingly. They cringed when the protagonist cringed, no matter what the circumstances. And when the protagonist was enjoyed, they also enjoyed it. And we have done then more research on this. We have virtually created then fairy tales. Reminds me forever of Jennings Bryant, whose name you might know. He was my student. He can write beautiful fairy tales. And here's one, and we went back to Piaget's theory of moral judgment in terms of staging, that you go through stages of development as a child. And we found children who were below the stage where they could not render equity judgments. They could not match, punishment to a misdeed by way of magnitude. They rather, at the level of here the upper one, expiation. So if you are at this level, this is essentially, these are 4-year-olds and the other ones are 7-year-olds. This is where it divides. So the 7-year-olds have pretty much already a sense of moral judgment the way we have it. 4-year-olds have not. They sort of wait for punishment to happen, and then they infer, according to Piaget and all the research that followed him, they judge on the evidence, on the perceived magnitude of the punishment, they infer the magnitude of the misdeed. So they were not bothered at all when we had created dramas where these were two princes fighting one another, and the evil prince had the upper hand for a while, but then the loyal royal guards got the upper hand, and then the good prince could retaliate. And he was either this condition here, we still talk about it as the Christian fool conditions. No matter what, the evil prince, as he had the upper hand, he wanted to put his brother in jail, in the dungeons, in the north, in the swamps, and that would be it. That would be his kingdom. And under retaliation was when now that the table had turned, and the good prince had to assign punishment. He said, "Oh, you, my brother, I will forgive you, and we will share, the kingdom equitably the way the queen wanted it initially." So, nobody enjoys this outcome. And in the case of over retaliation, the outcome there administered by the good prince, or the good character, suddenly was enormously vicious. He had the bad one feathered and tarred, sent through all villages, through the humiliated in public, through the streets, and finally he was to put in the dungeons. He had nothing at all, and he was to live on stale bread and rotten chairs, kingdom with the reds. I don't know. You get the idea. And here you see that this works beautifully in terms of showing the significance of moral judgment as such a vital entity in considering enjoyment of drama. So we are moral monitors after all, whether we like it or not, or whether we believe it about ourselves or not. Now, I wanted to just give you a quick idea of there are some big old notions that we are in the process of throwing out, change in the wind. And we have constructed new theories, and they hold up very nicely. And I could, again, talk about study after study after study now with adults and in drama terms. It really works, the model that I have developed. But I want to now focus the second part of my brief presentation here on what is considered now hot and controversial, and still is in certain things we know, but much is there that we do not know and do not understand. So here come challenges for all of you if you're interested in entertainment research. And I'm talking about the emotional after effect of being exposed to drama. Being exposed to different genres, like to comedy or to suspenseful drama or to tragedy. You know, what do we know about this? And I will start actually not to talk about drama, but take a particular form of drama, which is not what we call fixed narrative drama, because the ending is usually a bit open, which is sports as drama. Because in sports, people usually invest their emotions in a particular party. They like one team, they root for one team, they have others that they hate. Oh, you know, there are plenty on the hate part. I don't know if there are many other lovers outside here. But, you know, at this time, I was at Indiana University, and the big thing there was basketball. And they had some undefeated seasons, you know, it's only a year, but in another sport. But fortunately, when we were contemplating the research, they had a pretty even season, and they lost and they won. And we found now genuine rooters for IU, they call it, Indiana University. And I come back to actually the West here, which should amuse you. Actually, here, oops, I haven't put it on yet. Here are data. And you can see in sports, the data, if you consider this drama that unfolds before your eyes and you react emotionally to it, the data are so beautifully clear, and with drama you don't quite get this clarity. So here is this warping here, and this door, no, you can see it. So here, what we did is this. We recruited people for live basketball games, so they couldn't possibly have known the outcome. This was live. And we brought them to the lab, you know, big screen. We served little nibbles. And, you know, they had a wonderful time there watching basketball, meaning that they that they either witnessed IU defeat a potent opponent like Illinois. Or they saw IU being taken by Illinois. So, you know, we went through an entire season of basketball to collect these data. And what did we measure here? You know, we are not interested, we were interested in this, but this is other research. How they enjoyed the game, this is pretty obvious here, so we figured in this case we don't even have to bother. It was self-evident, you know, that they would be joyous when IU had defeated the opponent and be sort of depression-like when IU got clobbered. So we were interested in the aftermath after the game. So after the game we said, okay, here's this guy from another department, you know, and he wants to study your motor skills and your mental skills and your social skills and even, you know, how you feel about chance. And we had set up situations where they could toss darts, which was now, you know, a skill game, at least remotely related to what they had seen. And we also an eye-hand coordination kind of thing, a motor skill. And we created a specific situation. I don't want to get into the details, where we simply could have them ascertain, oh, I would do better than the average, and I would do so much better than the average or I would not live up to the average, but do so much worse than the average. So we could measure their inflated ego at the time. So motor skills, and this was darts throwing. And as you can see, after a win, wow, totally overrated their dart throwing skills. After a loss, they're totally underestimated. Mental skill, we had some scramble anagrams, or unscramble anagrams, I should say. So scrambled word sequences, and they had to undo them. How many can you do in this unit of time? Total overestimation after win, total underestimation after losing. Then we had one that I still get flack for. I presented this at one conference, and a lady was upset about it, the way we did it. But what we did is, how can you measure their social skill inflation? So what we did, and this is the first study, this is all done with men. We took photographs of a sequence of ladies, and they were sort of pre-judged from very beautiful and cute to not so, I didn't say ugly. Because once I did, and I got it over the head for me. So we're not ugly, they're just not so beautiful. So it was clearly scaled. But then we scrambled it all up at random, and we showed them this. And just imagine you would ask this lady for a date, and then there was a scaled response. It started with love to, and ended with drop dead. So in anything in between, this was our measure of social skill or social competency there.
Drop dead is one of the measures.
It was. It actually was. But nonetheless, we had some difficulty publishing this in JPS because the social psychologists don't like this kind of. Yeah. But it was done in defense of us. This was done a while ago. At any rate, in the middle, you see who's in the middle, who is neutral. This we had to create now also games where they couldn't care less about the outcome. They were not rooting for or against anybody. These are West Coast teams, like Stanford against Oregon. Nobody cares. So I paid you back, I hope. Huh? Then the yellow line is the only thing where it doesn't work, and this is chance. They should toss dice, and we gave some the statistical expectation as the average. Could you do better? How much? Would you do worse? How much? And this didn't work. So chance, they don't control the event, but when they thought they had control over the event, inflated. And they, of course, also delivered them better. But the behavioral measures are much less strong than the inflation that you get, thinking you could do better, or being depressed and thinking you couldn't do that well. Okay, so in sports, this is a big thing, and I could, again, I could fill an hour easily on just our research alone on this, because we did it then with football. And we used the threat of the Gulf War, and we had games shortly taking place. In fact, I think within a week before we started the Gulf War. And the measures there were, how likely is it? And the students always hated the idea of a war. And they considered it much less likely, positive, rosy eyes when they were up, and depression like, oh, it was so likely. And then we had even questions, how many casualties would we take? And it was just by thousands out of line, too high or too low. Or in Germany, the very strong research there too. They did the following. They had a study where Germany in international soccer did win or lose. And they called people who had seen the games the next day. So it's by no means just a few minutes after seeing things. So this is the day after. And they interviewed them on how they felt about the job market and employment. And they overestimated their chances enormously after Germany winning a soccer game. And I mean, I hope you see the irony of it. It's certainly not that they contributed in any meaningful way to the winning or the losing of the German soccer team. So this you have in sports, and if I also may just point to a mechanism, this usually is related to changes in androgen levels, testosterone, everybody seems to know. So male hormones. if they shoot up after a glorious win. This was even found after non-contact sports, such as playing chess. If you play chess and you win gloriously, testosterone shoots up. This is really that been demonstrated, and it goes down with defeat. So in animal language, you sort of pull in your tail, and you know you've got a beating. At any rate, the evidence very clear, no problem at all. The problem comes now when you come to drama. And you should know that everybody seems to know something about humor and how good it is. Look here, Shakespeare knew all about it. And this is I think the prologue to, I have it here, The Taming of the Shrew. And frame your mind to mirth and merriment, which bars 1,000 harms and lengthens life. Now it's almost a truism, that humor has beneficial health effects. And medical people became interested, and they have shown that immunoglobulin A shoots up, so this is part of the immune reaction, that cortisol, which is a stress reaction, is under control, dopamine shoots up. There's one study that shows the frequency, which is an immune reaction, the frequency of natural killer cells goes up. This is wow, when you see the data on this. Now, the unfortunate story is they just always compared humor against the absence of humor, not humor. And it was left totally unclear whether you would get anything else with suspenseful drama, or I don't know, with any other form, any other genre of drama. So this was unclear because these people had only an interest in humor, and I was at humor conferences where everybody seems to already come. Humor is a good thing, and nobody can possibly show anything that would call the thing in question. So you have this kind of mindset. Well, let me quickly give you a run through the better research, I think, on the effects of humor. Because much of the research, I should say, is just asking people, did it make you feel better? Did you think it improves health? I mean, there are surveys on it, and I'm inclined not to make too much of what people say about it, or how they read the effect. Does this have? What do they know? Is my perspective. But one of the first studies that I consider meaningful was done in a home of the elderly at Clemson University. So 2 nurses running the home of the elderly. They did run the study, and they had hoped to work with questionnaires, but then it turned out that the elderly were a bit on the senile side, and this was not meaningful. And here, by accident, they had something else to look at, namely, they suddenly remembered that they had records. They had to keep records of the nurse, the evening nurse, the night nurse, coming around with her little card and offering analgesics, so painkillers. And suddenly they looked at these charts and they found this. You look at the first day. This is now they're separated nicely at random, the whole group of their inmates there, and then they assigned them to either a week every day a comedy, and the other group a week every day serious drama. And here you see that after this was the first showing, the comedy outdid, maybe I should put it the other way around, because the comedy is the dark bar, is it not? Yes. So, they're significantly, less than half the number of requests for pain killers. So they must have felt pretty good, is the inference. So maybe it helps. The difference here is telling. Now, it seems to have then the second time around still very good, and then it seems to become weaker until the end, where this is an accident happened. Namely, some of the folks in the drama group got wind that the others had more fun. And they switched over, and then finally they spotted it and pulled them out again. So never mind. Which of course in itself is evidence in favor of selective exposure to comedy, which in other studies we have shown. Now, in the more experimental, the more rigorous research, but this was, of course, the ultimate behavioral measure there that they came up with. Just look, how well they feel. If they feel good, they don't take so many drugs. And here you have one of the first, this comes out of Texas, Kogan, Walls, and McHugh, and they used a cuff procedure, to inflict pain, which is just like the pumping up the cuff for blood pressure measures. And they pump it up to a point where, by instruction, they should say, stop it, it hurts now. So, once you reach the pain threshold, in technical terms, it's called the pain threshold, they determine. And this is what this study measured, and it was again. Okay, I rush it up. So what they found is, in these terms, the pain threshold, pain tolerance goes up. And they didn't know this. They wanted actually hear this where it says relaxation. This was Lazarus's relaxation therapy. They wanted to demonstrate that it works. They did. But they had thrown in a Cosby tape just to, fooling around. And this did better. Did better than Lazarus's relaxation theory. Now, that's where we came in. I thought, oh, yeah, I taught a seminar on entertainment again, and I was very dubious about this research. And I said, let's try it, and see if it really works. And we had here, as you can tell, we had now all sorts of drama. Stand-up comedy, and really we had to pre-test it. This is what the students really like. Stand-up situation comedy, stand-up comedy both. Then action drama from television, instruction, which was actually the Frugal Gourmet, I remember, a cooking show that was neither, it was informative, but nobody hated it, nobody loved it. And then this was now the novelty. I said, we have to do something novel, otherwise we don't get any laurels for doing the study. So let's put in tragedy, because tragedy should be the conceptual opposite to lightheartedness, gaiety, to comedy. Here it's the don't have to explain it any further. So here you see the fly in the ointment. Suddenly this theoretically, if it is the amusement, if it is lightheartedness, if it is humor, this should have been the least good. But it was comparable to the level, and we didn't trust it. So we had it repeated, and it repeated beautifully. So it's at the same level, tragedy. Some people apparently enjoy tragedy, and they tolerate a lot of pain after that. But of course, maybe also you can speculate semantically. Maybe there's a sort of semantic affinity between somebody tolerating pain, suffering there, and then you do a little better yourself. I skip a few studies. I want to come back. But we have worked with genres. I want to make at least the main point. So genres, and we had genres of that were pre-tested as very pleasant, as very unpleasant, and we had used other measures, like the other measure is hand in icy water and how long it takes before you pull it out because it starts hurting. And there this is published more in medical journals, but here you have at the right side sort of this bias toward if they're in a good mood, if drama put them in a good mood, they tolerate more pain than otherwise. So not compared to no drama, but compared to other forms of drama. So drama seemed to work, but then again it didn't. Because now, if I still have 3 minutes left, at the time I taught a seminar again, and I had a male nurse there, and he had a friend who was as a male nurse flying traumatized soldiers back from Vietnam, to American hospitals. And they had observed, and this student told me, my friend, he tells me that once by mistake they dished out pornographic magazines, and it got quiet, and they did not want that much morphine. And then here is serious research coming out of Johns Hopkins, and somebody, the bottom line here is, the effect was certainly more powerful than aspirin, and in some cases more powerful than mild narcotics. This was now, evidence in the news. This was the New York Times, and we tried our luck with this by involving erotica. If sexual fantasy does it, we show them erotica, and this should do it too. So colloquial evidence was there, and this of course is more than colloquial evidence from the Johns Hopkins Institution. And here you can see the genres that we used. So we used now a control, which was again something that was not likable. Well, I think I have it somewhere here on a sheet what it was. It was a travelogue, the English countryside, not likable, nothing emotional about it. And then the red bar is suspense. And this was all the time there was suspense. Maybe you remember Blown Away, with I guess, getting a bomb defused under all sorts of circumstances, I seem to remember. And horror is easy to find. We used Hellbound, Hellraiser 2. And the erotica were the Wild Porter. And now, this looks like, oh, it really worked with erotica and also worked with suspense. The first time suspense had been tried, and bingo. But this looks like a total exaggeration, because statistically, these effects were not making significance, only combining things, and this was not convincing, so we didn't want to do that. So we had not been able to replicate the sexual fantasies thing or erotica, with having this blessed effect of making you more tolerant toward discomfort or about discomfort. And then we looked at why this happened. And here is the simple answer, and I think there's a lot of information in this. The response to certain genres of drama, like erotica and horror in particular, it's much more uniform when you talk about suspense, much more accepted as a genre, and people respond similarly. But you can virtually find people who hate and are disgusted with erotica. You get them among students, and people who just love it. And it's bimodal. There's nothing in the middle. The mean is not really a meaningful measure. So you get a bimodal distribution. People hate it and love it. The same is true for horror. Some people just despise horror, and others love it. And we took the following position. Well, we seem to have trouble with genres. And we still don't understand much why people respond so diversely to certain genres, like the ones I mentioned. Maybe it's personality, maybe it's what's in the film, maybe the particular formats within the film, variables within the film. To be short, we don't know. So this is still an open question. But we took the following position. This is my bottom line here. We said, let's just assume that genre doesn't make a darn difference, but that how you enjoyed the movie or failed to enjoy a movie, whether you came out in a good, elated mood or in a depressed mood, that this would be the critical key. So we threw everything together, and then in a regression fashion just looked at mood after exposure, and look what you get then. So in the middle, this is where people don't care one way or the other, but and you also see that it's both men and women. Even the effects are stronger. The effects are even stronger for women. I have to look at my chart here, but I say the right thing. Yes, and you see that no matter what film they had seen, no matter what genre they had consumed and responded to, when they left exposure to drama and were in an elated mood, they were so much more tolerant of aversive conditions. And when they were displeased and disappointed, disenchanted when they didn't like it or responded very negatively, came out in a negative mood, they showed very little tolerance of pain in particular. Now I shall sum it up, since I have half a minute left. And here it is. So what do we know about genre and this presumably healthy, sometimes apparently not so healthy, afterglow of exposure to drama? And I'm talking about fixed fiction narration. I mean movies, not playing games. We don't know too much about that. Not playing computer games. And there, we can generalize now. We can make a statement on comedy. Comedy as a genre promoting lightheartedness and gaiety is capable of fostering enhanced favorable moods, fostering and enhancing favorable mood states that mediate superior coping with adverse conditions. Now the next line. Dramatic genres that do not aim at creating lightheartedness and gaiety, such as suspense, erotica, and even tragedy, are also capable of fostering and enhancing favorable moods that mediate superior coping with adverse conditions. And now I try to be general, at least in terms of a hypothesis. We can make a statement about games. If you leave computer games, elated or depressed because of the outcome, I think it should be similar. So that's at least the hypothesis. More generally, media entertainments of any kind, to the extent that they foster and enhance favorable mood states, should be capable of mediating superior coping with adverse conditions, if only because they counteract and diminish the pathogenic effects of unavoidable daily stresses. And I shall leave it there.
We have a few minutes for questions. I'm sure Larry left with the notion that we now will see probably erotic short films before or after each faculty meeting. And I'm sure the students are all thinking about how you got this through the respective IRBs. I have no idea how we would get it through here. But let's have a couple of questions, yes.
Are you familiar with the film Seven?
No.
It was a blockbuster in the 90s, and I'm just curious, because it's always distressing. Thank you, by the way, and it was very interesting. It's always distressed me why that was such a popular film, because the protagonists all died. I mean, it's kind of an inversion of the typical narration that we expect, but it was hugely received. I mean, it was really, and I was wondering...
Would you classify it as a tragedy?
It was a horror film.
Oh, horror.
It was. What would you say? Horror.
It was a suspense murder mystery. There's a psychopath on the loose who's killing based on the 7 deadly sins.
And everybody that is the protagonists and all the sympathetic characters are all destroyed. So I mean, there is no. It really inverted the narrative.
Yeah.
Form, and I'm just
Well, the genre, the horror genre is a peculiar animal, and we have done quite a bit of research actually on that, and some of it might shed light on this particular success film. First, I had once a postdoc from the Netherlands, and she had done careful content analyses, and she determined that in many horror films there seems to be something of redeeming value at the end. This was not so much true for horror films as it is for tragedies. The tragedy, if some people come admittedly to harm and are wiped out, but sometimes there is this element, maybe they died for the common good or something of redeeming value comes out of it. And you can find this with regularity. And so if you want to look for publications, I could help you to some of them. Now comes the other part. Some horror films are, of course, absolutely devoid of redeeming value of any sort, and they chop up one after the next, and it becomes a cult film nonetheless. We have, for example, worked with the great Texas Chainsaw Massacre, I think it was called. Where the protagonist, the woman, is squealing like a pig all the way through. There's no other way of putting it, and everybody comes to it. There's no hero in it, so you cannot, you can't see anything even if you look very hard for something that you could characterize as having redeeming value. But the other research that we have done on horror is that there's a social component. You don't necessarily ever bother to enjoy horror alone. You go either with friends in male groups, and we have studied this actually, but there's also, the couple, the heterosexual couple. A very typical part of going to the horror movies. And what we have shown experimentally is, and actually it's interesting that some of the men already have a pretty good understanding of why they do what they do. The women also. I have proposed something that now has gotten a nickname. It's called the snuggle theory of horror, because they essentially go because they will, if the female lives the terror or whether she fakes the terror, it doesn't matter. She snuggles up, and this is why they are there. So you can get close to the girl. There in the horror movie, this is something that no other movie offers. It's also the boys have totally different motives because they are there to prove their manhood because they can't blink an eye. If they're other, if they look at one another, you blink an eye, you don't want to go to horror movies again. You go to horror movies to show that you go there, and they actually allege this. Oh, we come for the special effects. We love the special effects. But what they really like is to show that they have become callous enough not to blink the eye. And if they can show this to their peers, that's good stuff. That's why they go. It's our explanation. So they don't go for the snuggle. They go for the proof of manhood. Totally different motives. And if you find a film that seems to have nothing but terror, this should do good on both counts. Mm-hmm. Okay.
When you showed your data on the theory of drama appreciation,
yes.
It came to me that the outcome of the good guy seems to be more important in terms of enjoyment than the outcome of the bad guy somehow. And I would ask you if this is a general rule, would you think, and if so, why?
Yeah, I would qualify it. I mean, in and of itself, it seems to be true. Well, because of people all the way back to Aristotle. But there is another part of it, and we have spotted this not so much in drama, but in sports, the drama of sports. People love nothing more than to be a villain, brutally destroyed, like a team, beaten to pieces. I mean, if your football team, doesn't let the opposition have a single score, cool. This is what people enjoy. If they somehow manage to really brutalize the deserving opposing team, that's more important than the liking of actually, in this context, it's more important than the liking of the winner. But if the winner, of course, is a liked party, all the more enjoyment. But there is something about the enjoyment of punishing. And if you feel that punishment is deserved, I've been in quite a few movies that my students checked out, and I was always taken by the applause some spontaneous applause when heads really roll, by way of retaliation, not by way of transgression, but by way of retaliation. Then I have coined this line somehow. Then this allows us, if it is in the name of justice, just punishment, then we are by just reasoning entitled to be almost perverse, to be brutal with dignity. We don't have to feel bad about it if we feel so good if someone's head rolls. Mm-hmm. That's an interesting element in drama, I think.
And again, we cannot relate to that in respect to UCLA and football. This is completely unpartisan here.
No. Okay. Well, everything seems to be a little different.
Any other questions? If not, thanks very much, Dolf.
Okay. Well, nice being here.